All right, folks, we are now recording. Good afternoon and welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you on January 6th, 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. We're so glad that you could make it today. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're so thrilled that you could join us. I accidentally clicked too fast. You are tuning in today for the first day of our 5-day interactive webinar series presented by Cheryl A. Cosley. And this is going to be your NAHASDA Essentials series. So we hope you're able to join us. You're going to join each day at 2 p.m. Same place. You'll see a green banner on your screen to join. Before we get into all that, if you could follow along as I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. So just know that the materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. All right. So whenever you are logging into one of our webinars, you can always access the course materials in the courses section. But I also have it for you in the shared notes, and I'm actually going to put it into the public chat right now. So one of the links that is in this grouping is the one to today's presentation slides. Looks like that is the second link down. So again, you could find that in the courses section. That's also where you're going to be able to find the many resource materials that Cheryl has compiled for this. And that is also where you're going to find the webinar recordings that'll be posted throughout. Because again, this is going to be 5 days. So today we're just day one. But again, I did put the slides in the chat. So there's a link in there to take you to the PDF. Whenever you're joining, so, in our subsequent days, you'll just log in like you did today, and then you'll click on that green banner at the top of the screen, and that'll bring you into the webinar. It'll start at 2 p.m. Eastern sharp. We do ask that you join with just listening capabilities so that when you join, there's not a lot of audio feedback. But if you did join with your mic, no worries. You can always just mute yourself. You can also change where your sound is coming from. If you found that it's not coming out of the speakers that you want to, if you click on this little phone icon that's at the bottom of your screen, it'll bring up a list of your mics and your speaker devices. You can click on the one that you would prefer your sound output to be. So if you are looking for, I had mentioned the shared notes, the public chat. There's a lot of ways to interact on this new platform we have. So again, if you need to mute your mic, it's over there right next to that phone icon where you can find your audio devices. We have the hand icon over to the far right. Cheryl does ask that you hold questions until the end, because usually the questions you'll have, she's going to answer as she goes through her presentation. But if you want to make sure that we have it to look at the end, you can always put that into the chat. And we have our public chat. You can just type in where it says send message to public chat. And then again, that shared notes section. And both those shared notes as well as the public chat will have the links to today's presentation slides, as well as your webinar feedback survey. Something new that's on this platform, you can set a status. If you click on your name in the users list, you'll click on set status, and then it gives you the option to show that you're stepping away for a second. You can raise your hand. You can give kind of a mood, show you're undecided, confused, sad, happy, show applause, thumbs up, thumbs down, that kind of thing. So again, you would get to that by just clicking on your name in the user list and then setting the status. And then before I hand it over to Cheryl and we get started, if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves into the chat. Just take a second. You can let us know your name, where you're joining us from, your work or your role in Indian country, your tribal affiliation if you have one. And while y'all are doing that in the public chat, just one final note. We found that on our new platform, if you click on that red menu all the way to the left-hand side, that red panel, it will pull you out of the webinar that we're in right now. It's going to take you to whatever you've clicked on the menu. So just a heads up, if you click on that, it's going to pull you out. But if you do it, no worries. Just click on the green banner once again, and it'll bring you back in. All right, folks. Without any further ado, it is with great pleasure I introduce today's webinar instructor, Cheryl A. Cosley. Cheryl, I'm going to mute myself and hand you over presenter now.
Thank you very, very much, Brooke. Welcome to NAHASDA Essentials Day One. I hope you make it for the whole week. Just as a small note, Donald Goggle-Eye, I think you have an open mic. I saw you come on there and heard you giggling a couple of times, which is a good thing, but just check that for me, will you? So welcome to today, NAHASDA Day One, brought to you again by the Native Learning Center. Welcome in, good afternoon. And my name is Cheryl Cosley. My Anishinaabe name is Redbird Woman. I am Loon Clan. I come from Keno Shinkoning in my language, which is the place of the pike. It is located on a reservation, Bay Mills, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Our waters actually border Canada. And it's really, really cold there right now, so I am coming to you from Florida because I don't want to be freezing. I served as my tribe's director of housing for over 28 years. I was also honored during that time to serve as the chairwoman of the National American Indian Housing Council. I did that for 4 years. Prior to that, I started as secretary, did that for a couple of years, and then total term of 12 additional years as the vice chair also. So 16 years on that board. I also served with the Great Lakes Indian Housing Association. I served as their chairwoman for 7 years. I've been providing training and technical assistance for the last 5 years. So basically since 1990, I have been in housing. So that tells you how old and how long I've been around. Welcome everybody, and I hope you do learn something. So the reference materials are available. Hello, Linda McGraw from Red Lake, Minnesota. I imagine she is freezing. She's an old friend of mine also. Those reference materials are really, really helpful to you. Make sure that you grab them. Your A&O policy, we're going to get into that later on during the week, but depending on the definition you use, it has to be redone due to HOTMA. The mailings regarding that are in reference material 32 and 33. Wage rates, things like that, tribal wage rates, they're at 7. Insurance requirements, all of these will tie into our instruction throughout the week. Really, really important that you grab them though, okay? So we're going to go and start with a brief overview of NAHASDA, okay? And then the formula. Eligibility. Tomorrow we'll get into allowable activities. Throughout the week, we're going to get into the Indian Housing Plan, the APR, grant management, your program administration, some of the other federal requirements, financial management, conflict of interest in various places, recording, record keeping, and of course, maintenance. That's one of your biggest expenditures you're going to have within your programs. Your housing program is probably the most highly regulated program that your tribe will put forth. So when you just think that you have to learn NAHASDA, not even close. We are mandated by many, many different federal regulations we're going to touch on during the week to make sure that you know enough at least to be dangerous and know that you have to adhere to them, okay? Or put somebody in charge of those particular things. So we're going to run some poll questions also, just for informational purposes. Brooke's going to be running them in the background. You're going to answer your poll questions in the chat. And I will keep going as you do those, okay? So how long have you been working in housing? I'd like to kind of judge my audience. 0 to 6 months, 7 to 12 months, 1 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, and I know I have at least one lifer in the room. Okay, there's my lifer. After you get done answering that, and I don't know, do you have a method where we can see how many people answered, or are we just looking in the background? We got 2 lifers in there. Good job, Diana Zink. Okay.
Since they all just answered in the chat, not for that one, but for the second question, I can make the poll real quick so that you can see the numbers, the percentages.
Okay. So what area of housing do you work in? So she's going to do that for us. A is executive director. How many of you are housing board or tribal council? Maybe admissions and occupancy staff, maintenance, construction, procurement, housing manager, finance, or do we have any ONAP representatives in the room? Okay, so I think you have to answer in the polling. This is brand new platform also.
Yeah, you guys can just respond to the poll with the letter that's your answer, and then I'll publish the polling results in just a moment. Right now, we got 11 folks out of 23, 12 out of 23, so we're still waiting on some folks to respond.
Okay, and I don't know if we're gonna get 100% rate. Go for at least 75 though.
Okay, we're at 16 out of 23 now.
Okay, come on, guys, plug them in so we can get her out of here.
Now we got 17. All right, hasn't moved. I'll go ahead and publish it now.
Okay, there we go. We've only got one our one executive director. I'm not seeing any Bs, no housing board or tribal council. We have 4 in admissions and occupancy. Good job, guys. D, nobody there. E, housing managers. We got 3 of them. Good for you. Finance, we have 2. Finance is a big job, especially should you be with a housing department. We see a lot of problems there, especially with the 425s and things like that. Now that we only have to do them yearly instead of quarterly, unless you're an investment tribe. If you're brand new at that, do them and just keep them in a drawer. It's easier to see where you're at throughout that year. Okay, and other, we've got an other. I think that was Patrick. So there we go. So there's our questions and our amount of answers. So what are you here to learn about, guys? Rules for the block grant program, what you can spend your money on, how to understand the regs and the statute, how to utilize it. What do they look for in an audit or a monitoring visit? What kind of policies do you need? And you don't know what you don't know, or anything that will make sitting through another webinar worth it. Okay, Brianna, I got that one there. So answer your polls for us and we will move on.
Got about half right now. 12 out of 24, 13 out of 24, 14. They're starting to come in, 15.
Probably close enough.
Okay. All right, let me publish these.
Okay. I don't know what I don't know. 7 of you. Okay. How to understand the regs and the statute. We're going to get into that part. That's really, really important, you know. A, the rules for the block grant program. We have 1 there. We got a refresher in there. We have somebody that's all of them. And A through G, another one. Okay. Well, gives us an idea anyway. Okay. So we're going to start off with the NAHASDA overview. This is what NAHASDA as an act looks like when it got packaged for Congress. Okay. Things are jumping. It is color coded by amendment. So when you print that in color, it's going to have different colors on there whenever they changed it. It's mandated by law, by the NAHASDA statute, that if they do certain things, they have to actually convey what they call negotiated rulemaking. And at that time, they will go through a lot of these things, or there's things that will affect this. And every time that happens, it's amended and it's color coded by those particular amendments. So that's important when you pick that up to realize it. These are all the times in the past that it's been done. It was signed into law in October of 1996. It was to streamline the process basically for us for providing housing assistance to Native Americans. It replaced several programs that give us different programs that we could actually compete for in some cases to fund our housing authorities. It encourages the tribes to determine what is best for your particular tribal members. And it also allows us to serve over income members under certain circumstances. Okay. So the strength is it gives us more responsibility along with that flexibility. We now have that flexibility to determine who we're going to serve, what we're going to offer, what type of projects, and how we're going to deliver those programs and those particular projects. We are still required to serve low-income Native families with exceptions. That was required under the 1937 Housing Act. Okay. If you had 1937 Housing Act, you'll see it referred to as CAS, or Current Assisted Stock. That is one of the major differences. Prior to 1996, when we were given money, or we competed for money to build units, we received money for those units to run them. It's called Current Assisted Stock. It's really important that you know if you have them, okay, your mutual help, if you had the mutual help program, you had them under that. And a lot of those are conveying, okay? But if you have rental stock under Current Assisted Stock, those should be your first priority when you are fixing your units, when you have a vacant unit, when you, if you have a fire, anything like that, because those units legally are not supposed to stay empty for a long period of time, anything over a year, and you can lose your subsidy forever on those. And those rental subsidies, if you have them under Current Assisted Stock, under that 1937 Housing Act, those don't go away. That's one of the most valuable properties you have in your portfolio. So it's really huge that you make sure that those are the first things that get rehabbed, that get fixed, and you put tenants or your tribal members into. I can't stress that enough, because they can come do and do an audit basically on your Current Assisted Stock and say, when's the last time somebody was in this unit? You're receiving money for it. So it's really, really important that you know if you have any of those particular units. So under NAHASDA, they repealed several programs. They repealed them because they said if you want to offer them, you can. We're not going to give you a separate amount of funding for it. You can take that out of that block grant funding. Some of the problems with that is, you know, we've had an influx of money in the last couple of years, you know, a good one. It's been a long, long time since that's happened, almost like back to the ARA ages. But truthfully, it didn't even keep pace with inflation. The amount of money that is received. We always need to advocate for more money for our programs because of that. So some of these repealed programs, the Traditional Indian Housing Development Program, we had something called Comprehensive Grant and Comprehensive Improvement Modernization. We used to call it CAP. That was to modernize our projects. The Indian Home Program. We had a youth build program. We had money for youth sports, homeless programs, things like that. All of those were repealed with the thought that if we want to offer them, we can take that out of the money that we get and offer that type of program, because there's still a legal activity. Illegal. I didn't want that to run and you just think I said illegal. Okay. So NAHASDA provides for an Indian housing block grant, both the annual grant that's received by the tribe and the program that directs the use of this grant is known as IHBG. Okay. Section 302 NAHASDA outlines the factors in our formula allocation. We're going to get into that later on, so you can find out what goes into the mechanisms involved in awarding those funds. It makes our block grant, our other assistance, directly available to tribes rather than IHAs. We used to have to be a separate entity. We were an Indian Housing Authority, and we were ran totally separate from the tribe. When NAHASDA came about, now you can be a tribal department. Okay. As I kind of alluded to earlier, One of the areas where there's a slippage is oftentimes if we are a housing department, our finance people aren't in tune with the numbers that we need quite often to do the IHP, to do the APR, all of those things. And money, pay Peter to Paul, they might use IHBG, as well as ICDBG. They can't go from one to the other. When our money is received, we still have to make sure our environmentals are done. So at certain times, we have to make sure that our finance people, especially if you're a department of the tribe, are aware of all of the different requirements of this particular program. Okay, so if you're a department, make sure your finance people get some NAHASDA training. Okay. It makes our block grant and our other assistance directly, like I said, available to the tribes now, or you can still have that TDHE administer those programs on your behalf. So those regulations to interpret and implement NAHASDA, they developed a group of regulations. They're under 1,000. Okay, they're the second item in your reference materials. Okay, the process of developing those regulations were mandated by the NAHASDA statute itself. There was negotiated rulemaking conveyed, so there was representatives from all over the United States. They always try to get broad representation. They'd like to see a rancheria, Pueblos, large land-based tribes, small land-based tribes, Alaskan villages. They want everybody at the table because even though we serve the same type, the same low-income Native Americans, our needs are always different, depending upon the areas in which we come from. So they always want that broad representation throughout the United States. Okay. So they mandated negotiated rulemaking process. They have to use that whenever they do anything with our formula. Okay. Or they want to change any of our regulations. And they will be developed by a committee of tribal and HUD representatives. And those documents from each section are actually in that link right there. The thing about negotiated rulemaking is it has to be done by unanimous consent. Unanimous consent is sometimes hard to do, especially when it gets to the area of formula, because of the fact that you can see during those formula runs what effect it's going to have on your particular entity. And sometimes you might take a small hit for the betterment of everyone else. So it's really interested. I chaired the formula committee at one point. It's a lot of hard work. Whenever you do this type of thing, it's really, really, it's for the betterment of all. So you're really hard tasked, I guess you would say. So can the IHBG formula change without changing demographics of the tribe or changing priorities in the tribe? I'm going to ask you, Donald, to wait until we get into that section. Yes, different things can cause a change in your formula, and the best people to speak to that is First Pick. First Pick is the people that are in charge of the formula, and will have all the information they will experts in that field. They will give you a phone number, I'll give you an email, and you can reach out to them and they will explain all of that to you. They're wonderful. So your tools, all these NAHASDA, regulations, the NAHASDA statute, those different rules, it's a self-determination program. We as a recipient have maximum flexibility in defining whatever type of program you want to offer within those established requirements. Our guidelines are within the NAHASDA statute. That's 54 pages long. It's color-coded by amendment. The regulations at 24 CFR Part 1000, when you see 1000, you know that they're talking about our regulations. We have PIH notices. So if you're new to this and you jump on the HUD website, you have to make sure you get over to the Native American side, okay? Public housing is quite a bit different than Indian housing. So any notice that is published will say, if it affects us, we'll say PIH. It'll mean public and Indian housing. So you have to make sure that that's up in the title of that, okay? And then we have what we call EWONAP program guidances. They are written specifically for us to give us further guidance, okay? And then if you can't find it in all of those different places, you go to the uniform guidance, okay? The uniform guidance, part 200, they're the requirements, the cost principles, the audit requirements for federal awards. That is the one document that your tribe will use as well as your housing entity. Their procurement, their auditing, their travel, as well as yours, will all be governed by that document, okay? It's basically like almost all things finance or money related. So you could actually have the same procurement policy as your tribe, the same audit requirements as the tribe. So your finance actually could mirror each other. Sometimes we have higher thresholds in certain things in procurement because we do more building. That's, up to your governing body though. And our reference material is not duplicative. So you look for one thing and then oftentimes it'll send you to another thing. But it's not duplicated, but it's a really good way to learn all of our regulations is when you start looking for things. So the difference basically between our NAHASDA statute, which is a law, by the way, statutes are federal laws written by Congress. They can only be changed by an act of Congress. So if you go to find out if you can do something, the first place you look for is the NAHASDA statute. So that's the first reference material in those items for you, okay? If it says you can't do something, it's a do not pass go, okay? That means you cannot do that. It cannot be waived since it is actually a law instituted and adopted by Congress, okay? So the regulations, they were written to implement the statute. The people in negotiated rulemaking decided that they weren't going to duplicate anything that was already explained clearly within the statute. They didn't put in the regulations unless it was, what they found confusing. So the regulations can be waived by a departmental secretary. In our case, it would be HUD as the Department of Housing and Urban Development. You can read about that at 1008. That is our federal agency of oversight. Now, it whittles down even further to the Office of Native American Programs, and depending on where you're at in the country, you have a different office. Washington, D.C. oversees all of them, though, okay? So a copy of those program regulations will be in your reference materials number 2. So our program guidances and our public and Indian housing notices, our PIH notices, are issued by HUD periodically. The only way you can get them is electronically. So in 2010, there's 2 ladies in the room that will remember this besides me. Everything used to get mailed to us. So we knew when something would come across that we had to pay attention to, that a law had changed or there was a new requirement. That is no more. Everything you need now, you have to go onto the HUD website, specifically Code Talk. If you're an executive director, you should be on that site at least weekly. Otherwise, you don't know when something has changed that, requires your immediate attention. So as of 2010, they quit mailing those particular documents, our program guidances and our PIH notices. We used to still get our formula stuff until COVID hit. Now we even have to go online to get that, okay? So the administration flow, a statute is that federal law written by Congress, only be changed by an act of Congress. Our regulations were written to implement the statutes. They can be waived by the Secretary of HUD. They cannot conflict with the statute. And our notices would be the official transmittals regarding policy issues, procedural topics, regulation, or statute. And the guidances are actually written to assist our tribe. They're used to implement the block grant program, provide tools for program management, and help clarify our technical topics. So those HUD notices, those official transmittals to recipients, typically regarding policy issues and procedural topics. The information in the HUD notices can be waived by the Assistant Secretary of Native American Programs unless it actually relates to the regulation or the statute. The program guidances assist us to implement our program. They provide tools for program management, and they clarify any type of or various technical topics. They're advisory, basically. They help us implement our programs. There's no waivers needed. That program guidance will further explain the regulation or the statute. The waiver provision regarding those documents hold true. So the negotiated rulemaking, like I said, that was charged with drafting those regulations, decided they would not restate any information already, talked about or stated in the statute unless they found that statute was not clear. So as a program administrator or an employee of a housing entity, you have to be able to refer first of all to the statute and then to the regulations. Then you start going through the program guidances and the PIH notices. And then you would go to the 200 document if you can't find it there, or it relates basically to that finance portion. So our PIH notice is issued by the Assistant Secretary for Public and Indian Housing. Our program guidances are issued by our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Native American Programs. And Code Talk, this is the link, it's an active link here, will show you the page that you need to be getting. All of you should be familiar. This is where our rules are, okay? This is what it looks like when you open up the Code Talk page. You can see PIH, public housing, housing choice. You got to get under the Indian housing section, basically. And then it will talk, A to Z has got a variety of topics on it. Plus, I need to mute that. Okay. So, Indian housing block grant programs, our HUD-VASH programs, our 184 loan guarantee programs, our competitive block grants, our Indian community development block grant program, Title VI, COVID-19 resources, and the Department of Hawaiian Homelands is a sister program of ours that has its own set of rules, their own allocation, but their information is also funneled through there. Okay, you can see here, you can go under NAHASDA, you can find the PIH notices to the beginning of time. If you click PIH notices here, your program guidances are the same way. Our HUD income limits, those change usually May, June of every year. Make sure at that time somebody is actively looking for that. Don't make that, put it as an addendum to your A&O policy, because you don't want to have to readopt your policy every year, because you should be using the most current income limits that are published. Unfortunately, I was in a I was at a housing entity, and they had quite a bit of turnover, and the girl that was doing the A&O didn't realize that those income limits got changed every year, and she was using one that was attached to the policy when it got adopted, and it was several years out of date. So we had to go back and find every applicant that there had been, and tell them, these are the new income limits. You might qualify. If you're still interested, please, contact us. You don't want that to happen. So make sure your A&O policies will, make a statement that we will use the most current income limits. And then make sure somebody in your housing office, you people that were in A and over here, are looking in May or June. And they'll come out, and this is where they'll be published at. Okay. There's tribal leader letters in here. You need to pay attention to those. They put a lot of information that is needed by the tribe in that particular portion. You do not need to be a tribal leader to read those. Okay. Those affect all of us in there. So make sure you check that. Grants.gov, if you're interested in applying for different grants, that's a great site for you. The Federal Register, there's different forms and handbooks. So this is the piece that you need to finish, everything, all your rules, your regulations, and where you go to find information. Tribal leader resources in here, TDHE director resources in here. If you have a youth build program, there's all sorts of different things that are very, very helpful to you. So this is what the guidances look like. 2024-01, the income limits for the NAHASDA fiscal year 2024. So this is what all of these look like, and it goes back, and you can go back up here to the prior year ones. Use this keyword. So if you want to know about running a criminal lien, FBI checks, put that in there. It'll pop up every notification or guidance published that has to do with that. So make sure you use that box also. That'll help you. But become familiar with those. Start reading those documents, and you'll understand what you need to run your program successfully. Okay. Same thing here. These are the PIH notices, and that box works the same way. And then all your archive notices are back here. I had somebody on my staff at the front desk. That was their job once a week, to get on the site and reprint anything that needed to be, any new guidances. So I had a big old folder. If I was at my office in Michigan, I could show you. It's about this thick of PIH notices. The same thing with the program guidances. I thought that was muted. Apparently it's not, and I apologize. Okay, so that's how you find your way there. So remember though, you're going to have all of the HUD policies you have to follow, and then you have what you're responsible for, those housing and tribal policies. And they can be stricter than what is allowed by federal law. So your housing and tribal policy can actually be stricter than your statute or your regulations or those notices and guidances. You have to follow your policies. You're going to see this happen, or when it can happen, the easiest is with your procurement. Okay, you could have $150,000 threshold allowable by law. Okay, your policy might say 100,000, and your staff goes out and makes $125,000 procurement. Well, they haven't broke that procurement threshold by law, but they've exceeded the threshold of your procurement policy, and therefore you'll still get a finding for it. Okay, so make sure you check all the different places to keep yourself out of trouble, with things like that. Your procurement is the easiest way to do that. So that summary of the statute, there was congressional findings with that. The federal government has a responsibility to promote the general welfare of the nation. There exists a unique relationship between the tribes and the federal government. They've undertaken that trust responsibility to protect and support Indian people. They've assumed a responsibility, Congress has, to improve our housing and social economic conditions. The U.S. has a special role in providing affordable housing and safe and healthy environments, and the federal government is going to work to assist the development of private housing financing mechanisms for us on Indian land. That federal assistance shall be provided in a manner that recognizes our Indian self-determination and our tribal self-governance. So the primary objectives can be found in NAHASDA within the statute, section 201. Again, they are to assist, ensure, coordinate, plan, and promote coordinate activities to provide housing for our tribes, to assist our tribes, provide that safe and healthy, housing, promote private capital markets, things like that, and plan for our programs. And then you'll see where they're broken up into statutory sections. So that's where you go to search for your items. So 1 is the block grant and the grant requirements. 2 is your allowable affordable housing activities. 3 is your allocation of your grant amounts. 4, compliance audits and reports. Title 5 is your termination of assistance. 6 is the federal guarantees for financing, and 7 is our other housing assistance. And as you can guess, I'm part French also, as you see me talk with my hands. I do that all the time. I almost have to sit on them, so I don't. So those statutory sections, again, they cover the Indian Housing Block Grant under Title I and our other federal requirements. So that's a good place to start looking. 2 is your affordable housing activities. What is eligible? What can I do? What about that low income targeting that we have to do and our other program requirements? Title 3 is our grant amounts. Covers that annual allocation and our formula. So that's where you'd go to start reading about your formula. 4 is your compliance, your audits, your reports. It covers the remedies for non-compliance, monitoring, and your performance reports. 5 is the termination of assistance for tribes under incorporated programs, and it will talk about those repealed programs that I hit upon earlier. 6 is your federal guarantees for financing of tribal housing activities, covers the provisions for our loan guarantee programs. And 7 is our other housing assistance for Native Americans, covers the 184, the other housing assistance for Native Americans. I'm sorry, I skipped over 6, which is the loan guarantee program also. Okay, Title 6. So the summary, basically our regulations, this part used to drive me crazy and sometimes it still does. It is written in a question and answer format. So where I would get frustrated, it would be like, that's not the question that I have though, but that is how they are written. Okay, to address the provisions of the statute necessary to implement NAHASDA, the regulations at 1000, they became effective in 1998. And they have been amended several times since then. Those 2 are split into regulatory sections. So you go about it the same way when you're searching for things. Subpart A is your objectives. B is your affordable housing activities. C is your IHP, or your housing plan. D is your formula. E is your federal guarantees for financing of, our programs. And F is recipient monitoring, compliance, and accountability. So the regulations, again, there are divided into subparts. A talks about NAHASDA, its primary objectives. It contains the legal authority of the regulation, some of those other federal laws, conflict of interest provisions that apply under a block grant, and key items used within the regulations. B talks about what we can do. Our eligible activities, who our eligible beneficiaries are. Okay, can I service somebody that's not low income? Cost and payment limits, your existing housing stock. Subpart C speaks to your Indian housing plan, the preparation, the submission, the deadlines, things like that. That's where you go for that. Your allocation formula, that's where you're going to look for your formula information, Mr. Goggles. E, your federal guarantees for financing of your tribal housing activities. It establishes your terms and conditions which HUD can guarantee our obligations for purposes of financing eligible housing activities. So we've got a couple of things where you can become the borrower and the government will back that particular loan. Okay. The subpart F is our monitoring, our oversight, and our accountability. It talks about compliance, performance reports, your APR, your HUD and your tribal review, your audits, remedies for non-compliance. You don't want to get into that. And the responsibilities of HUD and you as a recipient. So it will require that submission of that 1-year housing plan for your upcoming program year. Details activities such as development, rehab, acquisition, credit counseling. It allows a tribe or a TDHE to determine what programs they want to offer and allows for flexibility in determining how to operate and who to serve. So while I'm going through this, what I'd like to see is a couple of you guys get into the chat box and tell me yes or no. Have you ever looked at the statute and the regs? How many of you guys are familiar with those things? If you would. And then I'm going to start talking about our key program elements, our formula, our eligible families, our eligible activities, the program administration, financial management, and our reporting and record keeping. See, guys, you got to get on there. If you do nothing else, get into 1 and 2 and pull those down. You can download them, keep them on your desktop. They change periodically, but not too much. You really need to become familiar with those, guys. They're the rule. I don't want to call it a game, but if you were given a game, let's say, and you've never played it before, the first thing you normally do is read the rules. We're no different. You got to know those rules. Okay? So these are elements of our programs. The key points is we get a block grant. It's given to the tribe or your TDHE, however you have it in place, used for activities that you define in your Indian housing plan. So your director is going to write that Indian housing plan. This is how much money we get. This is what we're going to do with the money. Okay. Then the APR comes about. That's your performance report. This is what I said I was going to do, how much money I was going to spend, and this is what I actually did. Okay. It defines the THEs as the existing housing authority that was established for purposes of housing under the 1937 Housing Act and is not an Indian tribe. Tribes can establish other entities through self-governance powers or by state law. Yay, Taryn. Make sure you keep looking at them. The more you look for things, the more you'll learn about other things as you're searching them. Okay. It's really, really important, guys, that you become familiar with those. So it also, the key points, permits the tribe to set a maximum rent that does not exceed 30% of that family's monthly adjusted income. What does that mean? That means 30% of zero is zero. Congress gives us this money for the purpose of housing low-income Native Americans. Okay. You can get in trouble if they're not low income unless they meet certain conditions. They're an essential family. They're under law enforcement, or they're under another provision that I'll teach you about in the upcoming days. Okay. You can get into trouble if they're not a Native American family unless they're essential or law enforcement. Okay. Supposed to be for Native American people. You have to be careful though, unless they're in like an existing mutual help program. 30% of zero is still zero. So that family would be living in there free of charge. You cannot charge them over 30% of their income. You have to be careful there. I've seen cases where housing entities have to pay that money back because you're supposed to be there to help them when they're low income. Okay. So just make sure you pay attention to that. It requires the tribe to use the block grant to operate and maintain current housing units. So if you have what those CAS houses, like I said, that were built prior to 1996, that's what you think. When was this house built? You can have a pretty good idea if they're 37 Housing Act or if they're a NAHASDA unit. Okay. They have that subsidy, protect that subsidy. It distributes a grant through an allocation formula that is developed under negotiated rulemaking. Remember, I said that. They do anything to our formula, they have to convey that negotiated rulemaking. Authorizes a federal guarantee program the tribe can use with the Secretary's approval, a federal guarantee to undertake affordable housing activities that does not exceed 5 times the amount of the need portion of the tribe's block grant. Okay, they would back that loan or that guarantee. So this is the Title VI Federal Guarantee for Financing. I just worked with a Pueblo that successfully did this. It's not utilized a lot still, but it's there. So the borrower repays the obligation. If you as the borrower, because that's who's going to be the borrower, is your housing entity, fails to repay a debt, and they should declare a default, HUD's going to repay that obligation on your behalf, and then they'll take that money out of your upcoming subsidy, okay? Eligible borrowers under this program include tribes that receive block grants and TDHEs that are authorized to receive block grants and make obligations and pledge funds as security for those obligations. Eligible lenders under Title VI are listed under Section 1,404 in the regs. So whenever you hear 1,000 and it's followed by a number, that's telling you it's in the regulations. You jump to that document that's found under 2, okay? Eligible activities, Section 202 in NAHASDA are the same for the block grant program. So it allows HUD to guarantee loans secured by Indian families, Indian housing authorities, tribes. This is speaking to the 184 program, okay? Some of our banks, local banks, aren't familiar with this program, and if you don't have a big tribe in the area, they won't commit the resource, but there are lenders that lend throughout the United States, okay? There's about 3 of them that I know of that really do a good job with that. So if you're interested in the 184 program, and then you declare your service area, basically. So my tribe said that we would offer the 184 program to our Native Americans anywhere within the state of Michigan. That was the area that they established, okay? So those regulations are published at 24 CFR Part 1005. It's not only trust land. You can buy a house in downtown, Sun City, Florida. If the Seminole had expended that area, that's the tribe in this particular area. So land located in an Indian area, Alaska Native area are eligible locations for that 184 guaranteed home loan. These simple lands within an approved Indian area, trust lands, sometimes that's the only way that you can get a product on your reservations. When I was young, I could get a loan for a car all day long. If I wanted one for 1/10 of the amount for a mobile home or whatever, they wouldn't touch you because of that fear on trust land, so. There's notices, PIH 2004-19, goes all the way back to then. You can pull that down now that you know how to get to Code Talk. So that's the other thing. Make sure that you become familiar with Code Talk and go visit that site, okay? So the regulations, there we go. Key points: reauthorized the Indian Housing Loan Guarantee Program. It extended our leasehold interest in our trust or restricted land for housing purposes to 50 years now. It expands our affordable housing opportunities, specifically addresses families who are above low income. So we have mechanisms to service them if we want. Requires HUD to monitor for non-compliance, take steps when that compliance does not occur. The regulations, the key regulations. So like I said, if you see that 1,000 and a number followed by it, that means you go to the regulations found in your reference materials under reference material 2. Your definitions are under 10. Your non-discrimination is under 12. Relocation and real property acquisition. Those are laws we have to follow under 14. When we do building, we have to follow the labor standards. You can read about those under 16. Our environmental review requirements under 18. Now, these are other federal programs that we have to make sure that we are adhering to with our program. So, as I said, we're very, very heavily regulated when it comes to this stuff. Conflict of interest when it comes to admissions, 30 through 34. Record retention, how long we have to keep what documents. You can find that at 1036. And there's 36 to 101, there's still regulations there. This is just some of the key ones that I jumped to. Affordable housing under 101, eligible affording housing activities under 102, tenant project-based rental assistance under 103, your eligible families are described at 104, 106 to 108, families that require additional HUD approval or require HUD approval, 110, conditions for non-low income families participation, under 120, tribal Indian preference or tribal preferences in selecting families for housing. So this is a snapshot of if you were to open 1,000, what it would look like, okay? So under subpart B, we have 1,102. What are eligible affordable housing activities? If I was to click that, it would say eligible affordable housing activities are those described in section 202 of NAHASDA. See what it does? It'll shoot you from one document back to another one, okay? So that is a sample of that. But that's how you learn all those regulations and rules too. You know, what families are eligible, you know. Why is it says my thing is about to expire? I hope I don't get kicked out, Brooke. It says my session is about to expire. Policies, that is the next session we're gonna talk to. As long as I don't get booted. So NAHASDA policy issues, eligible families, your tribal preferences in selection. We have to maintain and follow those applicable income limits that are published every year. What your tribe uses for their definition of low income, what's your definition of gross annual income, your eligible activities, your required policies. You're going to have maintenance policies. You should have inspection policies, useful life, uniform relocation assistance, conflict of interest. You're going to find those in admissions and the administration of contracts, procurement, your total development cost. Make sure you pay attention to that if you're doing any building. Those also, I believe, in your reference materials. Financing, your personnel policies. So we have numerous required policies. Section 203 in NAHASDA requires that we have certain policies adopted, okay? Rent policies, insurance, admission and occupancy policies, that is one of the most important documents you'll have is your A&O policies, your maintenance policies, your inspection, your conflict of interest. And then you will have, depending on what type of programs you run, additional required, you know, individual program policies, your collections policies, grievance policies. You're going to have a grievance policy for your employees, a grievance policy for your tenants, and you're going to need an additional grievance policy for Indian preference. Personnel policies, travel policies, drug-free workplace, criminal background checks, procurement, capitalization, disposition, inventory, investment, finance, and cash management, just to mention a few. Make sure your policies are up to date, okay? You can use acknowledgement statements. They help a lot. A signed acknowledgement is proof that a policy and a procedure was communicated to your stakeholder, your leasee, your user, your staff. You can combine your acknowledgement statements with handbook disclaimers for additional protection. Make sure you allow your attorneys, you know, to look at any disclaimers. The majority of your policies, always your leases, okay? So this particular one, I've received a copy of the handbook or the policy. I understand it's my obligation to read and understand this material, to abide by the rules established by the organization. I understand that I'm governed by these policies and procedures, and the organization can change them at will. So that's like a personnel policy acknowledgement. Now this one you would put in with your tenant handbook. I would make one, the last 2 pages of your policy, you put that on there with a signature line and a date line. Make a duplicate of that. When you hand out the policies, you tear off the back page of that and you put that in your file. You keep a signed one attached to and dated on the policies that you send the tenant with. Then if there's a breach in the policy, it's pretty easy to say, you signed this on January, 6th of 2025. It says that you were going to find out if you didn't understand, so this one reads, I've received the tenant handbook, which outlines both my obligations and my privileges as a tenant. I agree to familiarize myself with the contents of this book, to seek clarification of any item that I do not understand. And I also agree to comply with the standards and rules outlined in this document. That's why you put two of them on there. You have one for proof, and then the other one, they're going to say, yeah, I said that I was going to do this. It makes it a little bit easier to enforce it. Okay. So the best practice is to make sure that you have what I call a depository. Okay. I work with a lot of tribes across the United States. I work up in Alaska, Pueblos, all over. I'm going to a Pueblo next week. There is nothing more disheartening to me, to an auditor, or to HUD, and I'm going to put us all in the same boat, when we ask to see a policy and you can't find it, or you bring one and it says draft across it, or even worse in my mind, I start working on something and I put 3-4 days into it, and then they come out with we found a different one. And it's the replacement document. Okay. Make sure you have a binder or other depository, a file cabinet, something where all of your current and approved, you've got to have proof of adoption on your policies. Okay. Attach that to the back of every policy so you know that it's the most current one. Prepare that binder or the depository that clearly labels each of the policies required under NAHASDA, and it has the policy in there with the proof of adoption. Make all the copies you want out of there, but you leave those main ones in that file so you always know where to find them. Okay. Your policies and your meeting minutes are not taken care of the way they should be, and they will sink you in an audit or a HUD monitoring. Okay. You got to have copies of all of your meeting minutes anytime your tribe talks about your housing program, makes a decision as far as that goes, or your housing board, however you're set up. If it's discussed, you need a copy of those minutes. If they're giving you any direction, permission, anything, got to be in there, and they will review all of those. Okay. So all your policies should be dated with references showing the approval of your governing body also. Really, really important that you guys make sure that happens. So, establish a document. Okay, this is our grievance policy. This is our code of conduct. This is our disposition. This is our vehicle use policy. This is our Indian preference policy. It's required by what, when it was adopted, what's the resolution number, any comments, that will help you a lot in the long run. So we made it through basically, but your NAHASDA oversight is a huge component. You guys got to make sure that you know what those rules and regulations are, to make sure that you know what you're supposed to be doing in your particular job. So the formula, we're going to touch on that. It's statutory. The requirements of the formula are found in Title 3 of NAHASDA. So whenever you see that, that's the statute. That's where you go to for that. The regulatory requirements that implement the formula are found in Subpart D, 1301 to 340. So when I teach, and a lot of other people teach, or you go into those things, one document will refer you to the other. So right now for the formula, it just told me that I have to go to Title 3 of the NAHASDA statute. That's where I'd start reading. And then it tells me I need to go to 301 to 340 of the regulatory requirements at 1000. So the regulations, which is that second one in your reference materials, to read about that. Okay. And that's where you're going to find your rules to the formula. Your IHBG is distributed through a formula calculated annually, depending on the annual appropriation that we get from Congress. Your first formula run produces our estimates, okay, that are available online, usually by June 1st, okay? Our final allocations are completed when those appropriations are announced and our prior year, what they call carryover, is determined. The date of that final formula run varies by when President signs that budget, okay? And you can see by the way our budgets have been going that, sometimes it takes quite a bit of time, okay? So the formula contains 4 key components, what they call our current assisted stock. That's how I started out today's conversation. All the units that you received the funding under your prior to 1996, okay? So anything built with your 1937 Housing Act is your CAS, okay? That's your formula current assisted stock. And your need, 1996 minimum, and what they call the undispersed Indian Housing Block Grant funds factor. Those are the components of your formula. So a formula response form is usually June 1st or the first Monday after that, it'll be there. Get online and you look at that. It includes the data to be used in the formula, the estimated allocation for that upcoming year. Your corrections are due 60 days after that FRF. Our census challenge deadlines are due by March 30th of the prior fiscal year. So if you're going to challenge your numbers, and that's an allowable expense under your administrative portion of your formula, those have to be in by March. It comes out in June. Your stuff has to be in by March of that year. Okay. So the regulations about that are at 1,336. Our corrections have to be submitted to the Block Grant Formula Customer Service Center on the appendices A through D. And that's what I was referring to earlier when I was speaking to Mr. Google Eye. I hope I'm not mutilating that. Final allocations are completed after the budget is appropriated. So the amount that any one tribe is going to receive is determined by your formula numbers and by that overall programmatic funding for that particular year. The purpose is to allocate the block grant funds. It's developed, as I said, as part of negotiated rulemaking. The intent is to make sure that we have an equitable distribution of our annual appropriations, and that allocation is the basis of your yearly budget. The 4 components: the FCAS, your formula current assisted stock, the need portion, the 1996 minimum, and the undispersed IHBG funds factor, which you can read about at 1,310 and 342. So the question, and I'm going to keep rolling as you answer this one, do you currently have FCAS units in your inventory? We have them. We have home buyer, we have rental and home buyer. We don't have any, or you are not sure. If you would do those in the background for me. And I don't know if you have a way that they can see that and I can keep rolling or not. Okay, guys, peek at it real quick, figure out where you're at, and then I'm going to keep rolling while you put your answers in there. Thank you, Tom.
Sorry, when I gave you Breck Presenter, it took away the poll. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay. So it's just a question that you need to find out for yourselves. Okay. We can see the answers here. A lot of them are E. You're not sure. And we have one that doesn't have any. Okay. So your first component is your formula current assisted stock. It's anything developed with that 1937 Housing Act money before NAHASDA. Okay. Low rent, mutual help, turnkey 3 or section 8. 1937 acts in the development pipeline after NAHASDA and Section 8 units, expired but still managed as a Section 8 program. Okay. Two elements in your FCAS formula: operating subsidy and modernization allocation. They are adjusted by the 1996 national average for your operating subsidy and modernization allocation. Local cost and inflation adjustments are put in place. Okay. Lots of E's though there. It's telling me I'm going to expire again. So your FCAS challenge highlights PIH 2017-15. It removed reducing Section 8 units based on FCAS reductions, codified conversions policies, required reporting on your formula response form. It clarified that a homeownership unit built after, it actually clarified homeownership unit eligibility for FCAS after it became eligible for conveyance. That has to do with your mutual help units. And demolished and rebuilt unit eligibility, you can read about that at 316 and 318 of the regs. So there was a unit conversion rule that added existing unit conversion policy to the regulation. Before it went into effect, we were only required to report units converted before 1997. Then they came out and they changed it in 2018. They said we are now required to report all unit conversions on your current formula response form. So that means if you had a mutual help house and you're converting it to a rental unit or vice versa, you need to change that on your formula response form. If they were 37 Housing Act, okay, they had a formula attached to them, which was a different amount depending on what type of unit that you were funded for. Okay, and demolished units. Now, this still can affect you even if it's not a demolished unit. A unit demolished pursuant to a planned demo dispo can be considered eligible as FCAS if you rebuild the unit within 1 year. Okay, so I did this. I had a 10-unit project, totally rebuilt it under a demo dispo, had to prove that it was cheaper for me to rebuild the unit on the existing footprint than it was to rehab it. Okay, once it was approved, I had a year to do that, and I would still receive the subsidy attached to that unit. Okay, if you're going to go over that year period, you have to get permission, and you can't go over it very much longer, and you need a good reason why. Okay, now how this could also come into play though, if you have 1937 Housing Act stock and you experience a fire or anything like that, and you're forced to move your clientele out of those units, it can't, remember what I said about that 1 year mark. It can't sit vacant for longer than that period of time unless you ask for an extension and explain why. Sometimes it's our building conditions that I can't get it totally done and up within the year's time. We had early snow or, whatever the reason being. But you have to make sure, first of all, you keep your HUD office advised, and then they'll send you over to the FCAS, the people that are in charge of that first pick. Okay, so units not eligible as FCAS if you built over the specified amount under your annual contributions project with the date of full availability after October 1st, 97, or if you have a unit and you're not using it for a housing unit. Okay, I moved in and had one that was actually like a fire barn, a fire ambulance barn. If I would have realized how important that subsidy was to that, I would have, tried not to let something like that happen. If it's not used for a non-dwelling purpose or a vacant unit being made available for occupancy, okay, unless it's being made available for occupancy. If you're using any of those CAS units for a VASH unit, okay, it wouldn't be eligible for that FCAS either because you can't double dip. The VASH would come with a subsidy and the CAS unit would come as a subsidy, and you can't do that, okay? Anything conveyance eligible, conveyed or demolished units not rebuilt within 1 year, or when we build with NAHASDA funds, we have no CAS funding for those, okay? So you're supposed to, on a yearly basis, review your formula response form. Report any corrections to your unit counts, your unit types, and your actual and expected dates of full availability. You submit within 60 days to the Formula Response Center, usually around August 1st, and your submitted corrections are going to be reviewed. HUD will inform the tribe of your corrected unit counts, okay? This is how you find your formula data. Make sure somebody within your tribe is looking at this, okay? Hey, we have a lot more tribal members than what they're giving us credit for. Or, if you don't agree with that, you can legally fight that and maybe get more money. An expanded formula area. We service people all the way to Detroit, or, and you have to be able to prove that you do that. I'm in a formula overlapping area, and I don't believe that tribe should know. That's a different thing. But these people that run this can actually, in the information's at the end of this slide, they can explain this a lot better than I can. And it's worth finding out, about your unit count. So there's needs. There's 6 weighted variables used within the American Community Survey, the ACS 5-year data. There's 1 variable. Your American Indian Alaska Native uses the decennial census data, which is updated annually using your census population estimates. And you can read about that at 24 CFR 1003:30. These are our need components, our weights, how many people you have at poverty level, very low income, 30 to 50%, low income level, how many American Indian Alaska Natives, how much of a housing shortage, how many of your homes are overcrowded, and then there is a rent burden factor, but that housing cost burden includes more than rent, okay? I'm jumping from one, I wonder, nope, there's 106. Your formula area, your geographic area for providing substantial housing services, your formula area and your Indian area are different. That population cap is to control and maintain fairness. Your American Indian Alaska Native persons, 2 times your enrollment, and there is a challenge process available. So the 1996, that component 3, your tribe's block grant is never reduced to what you received in funding in 1996. It is the amount the tribe's Indian Housing Authority received for operating and modernization and subsidy. So your block grant funding is adjusted to the amount received in 1996. It's a statutory requirement that you can never fall below that amount. So there is a new factor. It is called the Undispersed Indian Housing Block Grant Funds Factor. You can read about that at 1003:42. It provides adjustments to very few tribes, okay? If their initial allocation, their yearly allocation is $5 million or more, that's why it only applies to, if they have undispersed block grant funds greater than the sum of their prior 3 years initial allocation. The initial allocation would be reduced, and any other amounts recovered would be redistributed to all of the participants within the program. Okay, so it dealt with what they called a pipeline, so that they weren't sitting on too much money because of the large amounts that they received. So if your tribe should receive 5 million or more in a year, let's say you get 8 million 1 year, 6 million 1 year, 7 million 1 year, and the 4th year rolls around, you cannot have 21 million in the pipeline and then receive that additional money for that year. Okay. You can read about that, or you can question them on HUD or the Formula Service Center, but that is to deal with just those few tribes that receive those large amount of funds. So the formula response form and HUD notifies the recipients of the data to be used in the formula, the projected allocation amount. It's available by June 1st, required by regulation. You have to go look that up yourself. It doesn't get mailed to us anymore. That's where you find it at, okay? Your FRFs and your final allocations will be published there. If you want to correct or challenge your data, you can challenge your need portion of your formula, provided that data is gathered, evaluated, presented in a manner fair and equitable for all our participating tribes. You have until March 30th of each year to submit your challenges to your needs data in consideration of that upcoming formula year. If you can't get it done until June, well, then it would roll into the next year. So this is what I was talking about. If you want to take a picture of this, and you had questions earlier, that question you had in there, Patrick, this is where you would go to the Indian Housing Block Grant Formula Customer Service Center. They calculate everything. They provide TA. You can email them. You can call them up. They are absolutely wonderful. They will help you with any questions you have. Okay, so eligibility is our next section. Our program recipients eligible families, okay? We have mandated NAHASDA eligibility requirements. Your gross income must be between your HUD defined income limits. There's special exceptions. You must be a Native American family, special exceptions, and you must be deemed suitable by your housing entity for the housing program. What is a family? Everybody's a family. That's what I thought when I read that definition. The term family includes a family with or without children, an elderly family, near elderly, a disabled family, and a single person. The types of families: low-income Indian family, non-low-income Indian family, an essential family, and law enforcement. You can serve any low-income Indian family within your Indian area as long as you describe that activity and that area in your Indian housing plan. Definition of low income is 80% of median income, the greater of the Indian area, or U.S. median income limit. Persons making up a family: Indians, non-Indians, elderly, near elderly, disabled, your single or sole members, minors, and students. Your low-income Indian families are the primary beneficiaries of NAHASDA. The family's annual income cannot exceed 80% of median income of the greater of your county or borough. The United States national median income, whichever is higher, and then there is adjustments for family size. You determine the unsuitability or suitability of your participants. Some of the examples of unsuitability would be a violent criminal background, drug-related criminal background, poor history related to previous housing, or in debt to the tribe or TDHE. My housing authority, if you owed us money, you weren't allowed to apply for any of our programs until you paid that. Okay, your low income requirements, Section 4 of NAHASDA defines median income with respect to an area that is an Indian area, the greater of your median income of the Indian area, which the secretary shall determine, or the median income for the United States. Remember, I told you those numbers change. Make sure you use your most current numbers. The last one was published April 26th of 2024. It's the earliest I've ever seen it published. If you have reservation lands in more than one county, so my sister tribe, my husband's tribe, 7 counties I believe they're in, you take the income limits for every county that you have properties. You only have to do this once a year at this point. You take that highest one, okay, and then you compare that against the national median, and you use the highest of the two. You always use your highest amount so you can, you know, make as many of your tribal members eligible as possible. Okay. Indian is defined by NAHASDA as a person who is a member of a federally recognized tribe or a state recognized tribe of which the tribe has met certain conditions that enable them to receive funds under the 1937 U.S. Housing Act. Indian tribes determine their own membership, their criteria, and their eligibility. So this is a sample of what the income limits look like. This is what a program guidance looks like, okay? The purpose is to revise the 2023. So you'll be a couple months, you're going to be getting it, and it's going to be revising our 2024 income limits. Okay. The FY 2024 area and state MFIs are available on the website. Plus, you hit them, and that's an active link. You have to make sure that the annual income of your participants don't exceed that MFI. There's program guidance that was also published last year, 2024-07, which is in your reference materials. It addresses the 3 annual income definitions. You have to adopt the definition in your A&O policy. As a side note, you can say that we're going to utilize all 3 definitions and use the definition most beneficial to either the housing authority or your recipients. Be aware that if you use that language, you need to run it all 3 ways and make sure that you're also, applying it. They want it to be uniform. They don't like any type of tribal preference, basically. Okay, so just be careful. Pick one, it's easier. And then here is your income limits, okay? It's got to be 80 to 100%. So 80% of median income for a family of 4 would be $78,240. So Section 4 defines median income with respect to an Indian area, the greater of the median income for your Indian area, which the Secretary shall determine, or the median income for the United States. You adopt income definitions for tribal housing policies. You make sure you take out all of the NAHASDA exclusions, all the federally mandated exclusions. You collect your income verifications, and you figure out what their adjusted income for purposes of determining rent is. And I'm right behind, guys, so I apologize. So step 1 is adopt your definition and policy. You must indicate in your policy what your definition of annual income you're going to utilize. You can utilize Section 8, census definition, or IRS definition. The guidance also speaks to exclusions in income. You have to give them if they are listed there, okay? Federally mandated exclusions. It's a good thing they were updated in January 31st of last year, so they're all on one page. I would suggest a binder of those items. I teach A&O also. You should have a binder such as this full of your A&O, not only policies, but your different mandated exclusions and things like that. Okay, you have to verify that income. Under 24 CFR 1128 requires you as a recipient to verify the family's income eligible, and it walks you through how to verify that income. There are you then need to adjust the income verification. Now, these are deductions that you have to give. You can't say if you get this one, you can't have these. You have to give them all, okay? Your dependent deductions for your youth, your student, your persons with disabilities. Your elderly and disabled families, $400 for an elderly or disabled family. There's medical and attendant expenses. Child care expenses up to $1,300 per year per family, not per person. The earned income of minors isn't counted. Your travel expense deduction. And I'm sorry, the travel expense deduction is $1,300, not the child care. The child care, you just need to make more than you deduct. And there are other amounts there. Okay, so Section 203 requires that you develop written policies governing the rents and homebuyer payments charged for your units. Additionally, this section requires the monthly rent or homebuyer payment cannot exceed 30% of the monthly income of any low-income family residing in an assisted unit. So what I got to at the very beginning was the Hotmer ruling. Now, we just received an additional extension on this. If you use the Section 8 definition, or you're one of those tribes that say that you're going to use all 3 definitions, you need to redo your A&O policy this year. So Section 8 and the HOTMA definitions reflect the new rules, okay? Make sure that you're on that. It was supposed to be done by December 31st, and we received a reprieve on December, no, not on December 8th. This one gave us until January 1st of 2024. And then another one came out and said we have now until January 1st, 2025. No, right here. December 5th, it came out. It gave us an extension of the HOTMA compliance dates for the tribes, and we now have an additional year. So make sure that if you use the Section 8 definition, or you say that you're utilizing all three, you're going to have to redo your whole A&O policy to reflect this. So we have until January 1st of 2026. Read this material that's in here. You can link back to it and make sure that you are in compliance, okay? So this has all to do with that. Refer to the instructions provided in 2024-07 for calculating annual income also, okay? So we have income exclusion categories, monies that should not be counted, you know, certain VA benefits, income of certain household members. For instance, a live-in age, you don't count at all. You know, and amounts that are counted as an asset rather than income. Things such as inheritances, okay? Income from self-employment, alimony, child support, you know, included if it's received. If it's not received, they have to document that they're trying to get it, go to a quarter of the jurisdiction and say, you know, they've only received this much, but they are actively trying to pursue getting, you know, that child support. There is no asset limitation. Income from assets is recognized as part of your annual income, not the asset itself. And I apologize for running late. Stay tuned. We're going to pick up tomorrow in this section. It's really important that you know who your eligible people are and how they become eligible. And Brooke has got some questions for you and feedback survey.
Yes, thank you so much, Cheryl. Incredible presentation as always. So much important information. Folks, if you look at the two most recent things I've sent into the chat, and I will send them once again, I have sent you a link for today's webinar feedback survey. If you don't mind taking a minute or two to complete that for us, they are anonymous and they help us know what's working well with our webinars, what we can improve upon for the future. And it is also something that we share the information with our instructors as well. So it's valuable feedback for everybody involved. I have also included a link to the presentation slides. So if you weren't here for the introduction and you missed that, you can go ahead and click on that link that I sent into the chat and you will be taken to a PDF of today's slides to download. Cheryl had referenced numerous resource materials. Those can be found if you go over to that red menu on the side. Wait until you're ready to get pulled out of the webinar because it'll take you to a different page. But you just want to click on the courses section. And when you go into the NAHASDA Essentials course and you click through, I think it's after the copy of today's presentation slides, there's going to be 2 full pages full of links for you guys to download and then have access to all those resource materials. So it'll be the same resource materials for each day of this series. And we hope we can see you back for day 2, 3, 4, and 5 all this week. You can access our recorded webinars on our new YouTube archive. The link for that is also in the shared notes, but I'm about to add that in to the chat. And then I'm also going to be adding in a bookmark that you can use so that you can save it to your computer so that you can log in easier tomorrow. And you'll just log onto the platform like you did today. And you'll click on that green banner at the top of the screen and it'll pull you into the webinar. Friendly reminder that it's not going to start until 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But we hope you can check out our upcoming training and events. We post about it all on our various social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And then we also have our in-house produced podcast, the Hope a Thing, a Native American podcast. We go into more micro topics within tribal housing and self-determination. You can find that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, Google Podcasts. And if you actually prefer to watch the interviews, you can see the recordings with our guests also on our YouTube channel. Oh, sorry, guys. I know that was a lot of information. But again, all the links that you'll want are right there in the chat for you. The webinar feedback survey, the presentation slides, the link that you can save and bookmark so that you can log on tomorrow super easily, as well as our webinar archive that's going to be on YouTube. So thank you so much for joining us for today. Again, this was just day one of the 5-day series with Cheryl. So we hope we can see you back tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If y'all have any comments for Cheryl or any questions, I'm going to go ahead and leave it open. You got some love in the chat, Cheryl, from Taryn.
I saw that.
Taryn, yep. You could join. But yeah, we hope to see y'all tomorrow. But thank you so much for everybody who joined. And make sure you use those links and that you go and download those resource materials that Cheryl's put together for you. Again, that's in the actual course itself, NAHASDA Essentials.
Brooke, do you need to know if a student is registered? If there's more than one student?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if any of y'all are sitting as a group. Oh, thank you so much, Cheryl. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, if any of y'all were sitting as a group while you watched this, if you want to give me a heads up in the chat and let me know the names of who all is sitting together so that we can have that for our registration data. That would be super helpful.
I just saw a couple of people that were double registered, and I found out in the past that sometimes there are different people watching it under one name.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that reminder. That does happen a lot. All right, folks, it doesn't look like anybody is typing anymore. So if you don't have any more follow-up questions for Cheryl or for myself about accessing anything, we can go ahead and wish you a fantastic rest of your day. Again, Happy New Year's, everybody. I hope 2025 is off to an amazing start for you. And we're going to see you back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's not a different link or anything like it was on our old system. Again, you'll just log into this learning platform and you will see that green banner at the top of the screen saying that day 2 is live, just like you saw day 1. Oh, we got somebody typing. Oh, absolutely, Stephanie. You're so welcome. Cheryl's amazing, right?
Thank you, guys.
All right, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and close out. Cheryl, have a great rest of the day. I'll talk to you tomorrow, and everybody else, fantastic rest of your day as well. Thanks so much for joining.
Stay safe, stay warm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm being insensitive down here in Florida. Please stay warm. All right, everybody, take care. I'm going to close out.